welcome to the GIC College of Central Bankers Conversation Series. I'm Kathleen Stephansen, the Vice Chair of the College, and today we will explore the theme of reconstruction, more specifically that of the Ukraine, its scope, framework, and what is currently being put into place. So to help us understand this complex endeavor, we are joined by Katarzyna Zajdel Kurowska. We will address her as Kasia, if you don't mind, Kasia.
Absolutely.
And she's a fellow of the College of Central Bankers. And in addition to that, she's currently an advisor to the Polish Development Fund and a member of the supervisory board, ING Bank Slaki in Poland. And prior to her current positions, Kasia was a member of the executive board at the World Bank Group, representing Central and Eastern Europe, and also a member of the management board of Poland's central bank, as well as deputy finance minister. So welcome, Kasia. I'm very much looking forward to this very important discussion on the subject. So let's perhaps start with your experience at the World Bank and its role in assisting or guiding, if you will, reconstruction of a country, and whatever it has as a framework and a process, can that be applied to the Ukraine?
First of all, good morning to all of you, and thank you, Kathleen, for having me today. It's a great pleasure to share our Polish view on this important topic, which has not only local implications but global implications regarding the scope of reconstruction and the implications of reconstructions and the direction of reconstruction. So this is extremely important, and I joined, as you have mentioned at the introductory remarks, I joined the Polish Development Fund to advise about this reconstruction process, which has already started when the war started last year, because we are not waiting for the end of the war. Reconstruction is a constant process, because with the sizable damage already of the physical assets, the repair and rebuild is on the constant basis. So this is very important, and let me first start with the broad picture that was described by the rapid damage and needs assessment by the World Bank, and the number, the total recovery and reconstruction needs, which were evaluated at the beginning of this calendar year, were more than $400 billion, which probably is much more at that moment as we speak. And if you think only about the damage of the physical assets, so schools, bridges, roads, buildings, apartment flats, houses, and much more, the damage was more than $140 billion. So this is a huge effort, and it will require a mobilization of many donors, international financial institutions, bilateral donors, but also Russia will have to pay for that damage.
Yeah, so I mean, before we get into that, help me understand a little bit how the World Bank has put in place, if you will, governance controls, so that we can be ensured that the redevelopment of the funding that is sent to the Ukraine is not lost, if you will, in graft thefts or even corruption.
Absolutely. So let me first focus on the first stages of financing to Ukraine, which was basically like a life I don't know how to mention, but this was like a very strong support for the budget financing. Mm-hmm. And the war was a surprise to everyone. So nobody was prepared for that. So when it started in February last year, basically the first what the World Bank and other financial institutions offered was just a pure budget financing to cover the lost revenues and also to give a room to mobilize military spending and humanitarian effort, which was the first stage. But with time, this support was much more organized in terms of planning the investment when the war is close to its end, and also the rebuild of the physical damage of the assets that I have mentioned already. So this lifeguard at the beginning was just a pure budget financing to mm-hmm. finance public services. And as global financial institutions and also bilateral donors probably cannot focus on the military spending at that, they couldn't focus on the military spending at that stage. Basically, this was purely for the budget financing. Now, as this requires much more coordinated effort. In December last year, G7 countries decided to create a coordinated platform called multi-agency donor platform, which includes not only bilateral donors like G7 countries, but also IFIs and multilateral institutions like the World Bank, EBRD, and others that coordinate, first of all, the needs of the financing, but also they plan investments for the current stage and for the future.
So on that point, these entities, they offer, so you have budget financing, so the planning, the networking. Now, what you touched upon was the crucial role, of course, of governmental and public entities, if you will. Now, that's not going to cover 100%, correct? So presumably what this means is that the private sector will be filling the gap. So can you just touch on the role of the private sector? First of all, who are they? What is the role of Poland? Because I think, in prior conversation, you mentioned that there are many corporations in the Ukraine operate, Polish corporations, that is.
Absolutely. This is the most important and very valid point, because the donor support is not sufficient. The multilateral institutions, bilateral donors, they can provide they can provide financing for the current needs and also provide financing for the future reconstruction. But this is only a part of the needs. Mm-hmm. As I already quoted the report of the World Bank about the needs, it will require more than $400 billion or even more to rebuild Ukraine, and those donors, including international financial institutions, they have no sufficient resources to cover all requirements. So first of all, it will be covered by European partners, because Ukraine is a candidate to join European Union. So it's quite natural that the bulk of the resources will come from the European Union. and it was already agreed that the EU will provide around 50 billion euros for reconstruction. Also, bilateral
Let me interrupt
donors,
you there.
Absolutely.
50 billion out of the, at the moment, the 400 billion estimate. Is that what you're talking
about? Yes. Is it? Yes. It's 50 out of, let's say, 400 plus.
At the minimum, yeah.
But of course, this is new 50 billion apart from what has been already provided. But as I mentioned, currently the financing is mainly to provide stability, to provide the public service, so the budget support. So this is for the current spending. This is not for the rebuild and reconstruction, which would be required after the war ends. So 50 billion is promised by European Union. Additional resources are promised by IMF, which already is financing the macroeconomic and stabilization program in Ukraine, which is around 15 or 20 billion dollars. There will be, of course, more going forward, but this is all together. If we add the European Union and multilateral institutions, and also we will add bilateral donors, it will be no more than $150 altogether. So as you can see from the very simple calculation, the private sector is really needed to step in and to take part in this effort, but also Russia, who invaded Ukraine, should also participate in this effort and pay for the damage. However, it is difficult at that moment even to calculate the share that Russia should or can finance. There are different sources. There are seized assets of the Russian assets of the central bank, or Russian companies or Russian state. So this debate continues. This is quite difficult and delicate discussion about Russia's involvement in covering the losses. So
at the moment there is discussion about it, right?
There is discussion about that. There is no doubt that Russia needs to pay and have to pay for the damage, but this is very difficult discussion, given the international law, given the ownership of assets and so on. So this discussion continues, but at that moment is difficult to assess the scope that Russia will have to provide. So the rest will definitely needs to be covered by the private market, by the private investors, and there is a lot of discussion about how it should be organized, in whether this should come with the support of development institutions, given the still very high risk of private investment in Ukraine. And this is the role of development institutions to play, not only during the peacetime, because the role of the development institution is to mobilize also the private sector resources and to de-risk those investment by offering different guarantees or being a counterpart in those kind of investment. So you asked me about what Poland and other countries plan to do. So I advise the Polish Development Fund, which is the group of the development institutions in Poland. And the role of the development institutions is to provide the kind of risk instruments, or the risking instruments, or credit enhancement instruments that will somehow encourage private sector to invest. in Poland, but also in other countries. So now,
so hang on, if I may interrupt you there. By that, do you mean that they provide the Polish government or the fund would provide a guarantee for the private sector to essentially step in and, zero in on, let's say, reconstruction of infrastructure, so on? Is that how it works?
Well, let me start from that at that stage, the risk of investment in Ukraine, given the low credit risk profile, high corruption, and also ongoing war, is so high that private investors are not willing to spend a single penny in Ukraine. There's a lot of discussion about mobilizing these resources, but the risk is too high. So the role of the development institutions that are somehow the state institutions supported by the governments is to provide a kind of credit enhancement guarantees and the risk sharing instruments that will encourage investors to invest or in the current risk environment or when the war ends. Mm-hmm. So now we are working on developing different instruments, not only the guarantees, but also it could be credit enhancements, it could be a private equity fund, it could be also loans with the very low interest rates, and other form of financing that will support private investors that are willing or to invest in the certain country to increase the scope of the production that could be used for the reconstruction in Ukraine. It doesn't have to be investment in Ukraine. It could be investment, let's say, in Poland, that by increasing the production, this production could be used for reconstruction in Ukraine. It could be in construction sector, it could be in logistics sector, in other sector that will be needed first to increase capacity for reconstruction. So for both greenfield and also investment in Ukraine, but also greenfield investment in Poland, but also other investment in other countries, those instruments are provided to leverage the private sector money or to the risk those investment if needed.
So and this is just from the Polish government. Let's be clear here, right?
Or yes, but those investments.
Yes, but
those investments. Yes, yeah. But let me finish on that. Those investments, those instruments are not only available for Polish companies. They are available for also other international investors that they want to invest in Ukraine or to increase their trade with Ukraine. So, for example, under the umbrella of the Polish Development Fund Group, which consists the Development Bank, Development Fund, but also the credit agency company, there are the instruments like guarantees that could be offered to German, British, US, or other investors that are willing to invest in Ukraine. So this is not only for Polish companies, but also for international companies. They can easily buy this product, the guarantee that is offered and guaranteed by the Polish state.
And at the moment, have you been able to assess the appetite for these? I'm sure that people are, companies will say, okay, the risk is very high, but in the future, when hopefully peace will come about, the opportunities are enormous as well, right?
Yeah, this is the point. because it will strongly depend. I mean, demand for those products will depend on the expectations, how long the war will last. And to be very frank, at that moment, the demand for those products is not very high because the private investors are not really willing to invest at that moment. They are interested in terms of, let's say, knowing about them. We have a lot of meetings with investors about what kind of products we can really offer. So there is a lot of discussion during different seminars, meetings, and other occasions. But there are not many investors that are really, new investors that are really willing to start a business at that moment. There are some, of course, investors that are already present in Ukraine, and they are interested to get such a products. But for the new investors, there is so the demand from the new investors is relatively limited. But this will, of course, completely change when we will start discussion about the end of the war, when there will be any sign of the negotiations of the peace contract. So I think that the closer we are to the end of the war, the more private sector will be interested to think about investing and taking part in the reconstruction, and of course they will be interested to get such a support from different development institutions, because this is not only Poland but also Germany via their development institutions, France, Spain, Italy, and other Nordic countries. They offer also that kind of development support, but also multilateral development banks. They also offer the same products, like the World Bank has MIGA, which is the multilateral insurance agency, which offers very similar product for which is called the war insurance, already for many years, even before the war in Ukraine started.
So just help me to put this into perspective in terms of, the private sector. You did mention in a prior conversation that you have, prior to the war, about 700 companies, Polish companies, having business in the Ukraine. Would that be the largest foreign, quote unquote, position of companies in Poland, or are there other countries that have many more companies?
Well, Ukraine before the war was a very attractive place for investment. So we have a lot of international companies and a lot of foreign companies that are present in Ukraine. Some of them they maybe not postponed the business, or they reallocated the business during the war and are operating from other locations, or they reduced the number of staff, or they reduced the production in Ukraine because of the military action. But there were already a lot of foreign investors before the war. This is a good sign in that sense, that there is a very good experience, good at bad in terms of the reality of doing business in Ukraine. So I really hope that many of those companies that let's say that they put the business on hold for a while, they will come back after the war. But definitely to open the business as usual, we really need the end of the military actions, because just recently we had a situation that close to Kiev, one of Polish companies was bombarded which affected heavily the business of this company in Ukraine. The good point is that the company said that will not withdraw the business and will continue further. But definitely, if you think about this kind of risk, that the business can be destroyed, there is difficult to even anticipate that any new infrastructure investment will start at the moment. So companies might operate maybe with the limited scope and with the lower production to maintain the capacity, but the real infrastructure investment, like building bridges, buildings, and others, houses, it requires stability. So we need to wait for that.
Yeah, and it's a daunting task, but just again to put some perspective, in terms of other international companies. Is Poland like the largest actor in the Ukraine, or do you find that you have other countries that operate in the Ukraine with a larger number of companies?
Poland is not the larger investor or partner for Ukraine. We are naturally the closest partner, given that this is our neighbor. But there are a lot of other international companies. So Poland is among others, but there are many German, US companies as well in Ukraine already. So what is in favor, or what is the Polish advantages? Of course, that Poland now is naturally a hub for reconstruction because of our geographical position and our largest border with Ukraine, and we are the country between the country between European Union, the center of the European Union and Ukraine. So we naturally will provide, via our country, will provide the majority of products, and both ways, from Ukraine to European Union and from European Union to Ukraine. And also, if you think about that we are the NATO country and European Union country, so we will be the natural hub that will provide all necessary resources for reconstruction. So already there is a lot of discussion to establish like logistics centers very close to the borders to enhance the border crossing, to improve road and railway infrastructure on our side, to enhance and increase the capacity when it will be really needed for reconstruction. So we already see that there is a lot of need to improve this infrastructure, because other way it will be like quite like a bottleneck, narrow bottleneck to pass through both ways, from Ukraine and to Ukraine via Poland, because maybe it will improve after the war ends, but at that stage there is no air cargo and traffic, because the air zone is closed, so the all logistic and all transport is provided or by trucks or by trains, and this requires.
I think that is a very important point that you're making, because essentially what this means is that, clearly Poland and the Polish economy will benefit tremendously from, its role of being so close, of being a neighbor to the Ukraine. But by and large, you will have positive spillover effects to other countries in the vicinity as well. And I think that, that is something that one cannot underestimate. once, of course, peace sets in. So it's I think, very important to put all the pieces together beforehand. But there's one question, and perhaps we can end on that. There's one question that is, I think, very important as well, and that is that you have here a situation whereby war continues, but now we have conflicts in other regions as well, and all this is happening at the time when Europe, the global economy, is trying to transition towards a greener economy. And we all know that if the net zero goal is to be achieved, or we can move closer to it, it will also demand tremendous resources in terms of financing. And I'm just wondering whether you worry about the fact that the instability that we are seeing in other parts is going to weaken the possibility of financing the reconstruction. Or, for that matter, that all this will take away from the efforts of transitioning to a greener economy.
Indeed, I'm very much worried about that. I will give you example how those events, they have implication on the global economy. We remember COVID, and it had a impact on all economies. But if you think about only the war in Ukraine, and there is a blockage of the grain transport via the sea to many countries in Africa that suffer for hunger. The price of grain increased rapidly because the supply of grain was limited because of that limited transport. So immediately, globally, the price of food increased, and the inflation in all countries increased only because of the implication of the, let's say, local conflict. So now, if you think that another conflict might spur the oil and other commodity prices, we might again face inflationary implications. For not only for the one region, but for all countries, both advanced and developing countries, and this is big. So that's why I'm so worried that with the rising instability in many areas of the world, it will be much more difficult and costly to put economy in order, and to reduce inflation, and to increase growth, which is so important to meet those development challenges and goals that we set for us. So to rebuild better and greener, we will need economic and global stability, which is not the case at the moment. So there are some positive maybe spillovers from that, because the war in Ukraine showed us how important it is to focus on the alternative sources of energy, like on the power of solar energy and other hydrogen energy as well, not only to focus on the fossil fuels, coal and gas that we were so reliant before the war in Ukraine. The same maybe now with the conflict in the Middle East. Maybe we should speed up the process of investing in alternative sources of energy. But definitely it will increase the cost, because it will be in the same time when we have some kind of limitation of other sources and rising inflation because of that. So definitely this is something that really worries me, because we are not operating in the full equilibrium, or we are not operating in the situation when we can apply monetary and fiscal policy with other, let's say, circumstances, like only defending our economies against those risks, or playing against those risks that are emerging. So, well, we will see whether this conflict is short-ended or rather long. But definitely it will increase the risk, and the increased risk is definitely not a positive environment for mobilizing private sector investment, which are so needed for development.
Right, and it's happening also against the backdrop of the more fragmentation in the world, and whereby, you know, the policymakers tend to be more concerned about their own national dynamics. So it's a very difficult and world, and I think that, you know, to set the pieces of the puzzles to be ready for, hopefully in the not too distant future, we can apply these towards peace, will be very good. And I don't want to take more of your time, Kasia, but this was really very interesting and so very important. And I'd like to, as per usual, I'd like to conclude these conversations with asking our invitee, what is, in your opinion, where do you find optimism, if I could say so, in the near term?
Well, it's reading the news or watching TV, it's quite difficult to find optimism these days.
I know, that's the reason why it's a difficult question.
So indeed, this is a difficult question. I always hope that the crisis should, first of all, that the crisis should not be lost, and we should build on the crisis and to find out a good solutions from out of that. Like I mentioned, that one of the positive of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine was that European countries, they increased investment in alternative sources of energy, and they even mobilized their resources to decarbonize even faster than it was before the conflict. So I also do hope that this new conflict, first of all, will end soon, and we in United Nations, we will find peaceful solution quickly, and we will build on that, because otherwise we have to be very cautious that the opposite is that the hunger and the poverty will increase while we are fighting with the climate change, and the victims of the climate change are usually poorer countries. So we have to mobilize all resources on fighting with this big crisis that comes, which is climate change, and to take the lesson and to work collectively to prepare ourselves, all nations, because it will be very difficult to find solutions if we will not decrease the temperature of global warming, because then the consequences will be not regional but global.
But global, that's true. Well, Kasia, thank you very much for this very interesting conversation, and we are guaranteed that we'll circle back to you and see how things are evolving, and I hope that it's very soon. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kathleen, for having me for this interesting discussion. And I think that we will have a lot of opportunities to discuss, hopefully when the war ends soon.
That's right. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And this ends our conversation for today. And we will resume in the not so distant future with another conversation on another subject. Thank you very much.